SFuels right by your side because it is going to be hot in there. And we look forward to seeing you in the stadium.
Well, good morning or good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from around the world. Welcome to the SFuels VPR Stadium. It's 6 p.m. here on the US East Coast. I'm Leighton Phillips and proud to have the fun of hosting this speed development session this afternoon. It's going to be hot and furious, as it usually is, and joining us to make a bunch of fun with that is our 100-mile world record holder on the track and on the treadmill, Zach Bitter. How you doing there, buddy?
Good. Thanks for bringing us all together, Leighton.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. Good to see you again. Trust you're getting some training in and the temperature's starting to come off to increase the duration and the volume there a bit. How's it all going?
Yeah, it's starting to become sane in the mornings from a temperature standpoint, which has been good. Training has been interesting this year, as it's been for most people, I think. But I kind of positioned myself in the early summer just to be in a position to skew the next couple months towards the specific things that I would need to do for whatever race maybe would pop up. So for me, that's going to be the Desert Solstice Track Invitational. I'm going to be going for the full 24 hours this year there. So the next couple months is going to be a lot of volume and a little bit slower in the intensity side of things, so I can kind of dial in the mechanics and the intensity for 24-hour racing, I guess.
That'll be a blast. Well, hey, folks, it may be a little hard on this screen. We're going to get into some bigger screens soon, but you may see that Zach's downing the latest Purpose outfit there, the sportswear from Purpose, and we're a proud partner of Purpose, and they're joining us here in the stadium today. We're proud to be working with them, and they're a proud sponsor of Zach, too. So with that, folks, I'm not sure whether everyone's had the opportunity to join us before here in the SFuels Stadium, but if you haven't, I just want to kind of walk you through a little bit around the background of what's what, so you can orient yourself, hear what you see on the stadium, and I'll show you here a little bit about what to expect. So whether you're doing a run session, you'll see a stopwatch pop up, and that's where we'll run the intervals from. If we're doing a bike session, you'll see a bike timer pop up. There'll be a screen like what Zach's on there, the SFuels screen. Or you'll see a screen with the Zwift athletes running. And folks, if you'd like to be surfaced into these Sweatfest sessions when you register in the future for these Sweatfest sessions, all you need to do is put your Zwift name in the registration, and we'll be sure to surface you into the events, and we can have some fun with that. If you do want to engage with Zach or the SFuels team during the Sweatfest session this afternoon, you can also put any of those questions into the YouTube chat session there. So Zach, 10K speed session. I know you're going to step on and off the treadmill today to tell us a little bit about best practice and maybe some of the risks of speed development. Why don't you first just talk us through why we're doing what we're doing and why we would do this kind of session?
Yeah, so this is what I would call like a short interval session or a higher intensity interval session that is going to be designed to really help you work on the intensity at which you would race a 10-kilometer event at. You can still use these type of workouts for a variety of different things. Like this is just going to be most specific towards that intensity. So if you're doing a 10K, these type of workouts are great as you're kind of peaking for that and that final push before race day. A general idea with it is that we're looking at about 105% your lactic threshold, so kind of close to like that tempo effort, a little bit above it if you're depending on what kind of vocabulary you're using with endurance running and stuff like that. But
right.
It's a 4-to-1 work to rest ratio, so you should feel some fatigue building up over the course of it, and with 8 of them you'll get a total of 32 minutes of total volume at this session.
Gotcha. Well, hey folks, as you see, we're shooting for 105% of your lactate threshold. If you're not familiar with that, think of your perceived exertion somewhere in the space of very hard to breathe, out of breath, and certainly not up for talking. So that's how you should think about it. But for those folks who are familiar with their lactate threshold, you can see this chart on the screen here right now. For example, if you say 160 as your lactate threshold, as we get into these intervals, you should be shooting for somewhere around 168 beats per minute, and that will certainly put you at your lactate threshold today. So Zach, I think we're pretty much right to go and get into the first of the intervals, and we got 8 of these ahead of us. Are you all good to get started?
Yeah, I'm finishing up my warm-up so I don't break my own rules that we'll talk about during this session, and then we'll be ready to roll.
Okay, folks. Well, I'll turn on the interval timer, and that'll give us a 60-second countdown before we get going on our first interval this afternoon. So let's move across here onto the track. You can see here we've got Zach surfaced here on Zwift, and just warming up. We've got about 45 seconds to go before we get moving on the first interval. As we said, these are 4-minute sessions, and then we'll have 1 minute rest. I'll be bringing up the music through the intervals, and bring obviously down the music as either Zach is talking to us about some of those best practices or risks, and also we'll bring the music down during the rest periods. So we got about 20 seconds to go, folks, before we kick off that first interval. All right, 3, 2, and 1, and let's dial it up, folks. This is the first interval. Hey Lee Glassman, great to see you joining us here in the VPR Stadium, buddy. Knocking out a few kilometers as usual. Keep it up, we'll talk to you soon. Hey Eric, great to have you back in the stadium, bud. I know you got some racing coming up. Eric sent me a note during the week saying that he's joining, that his performance might be a little slower today as he starts to taper down for his race coming up next little while. Good to see you, buddy. Okay, we got less than 2 minutes to go, folks, on this first interval, and we're going to cover a bunch of tips from warm-ups to strength training to static stretching to dynamic stretching to block training. It's going to be a blast today, folks, hearing from 100-mile world record holder on what's good and what's bad. Let's get into it. Okay, it's good to see Zach there in the threes. And folks, for anyone that runs under the 5-minute mile, we try to acknowledge that with our cowbells. And welcome to the Sub 5 Club. So nice to see Zach out of the blocks in the Sub 5 Club. Let's get back into it.
Lions roaring in the morning sun, searching for a longer day. People feeling like the light has just come. We must never stop the way. Yeah. Birds jumping and I hear my name, grasping into a life. Life is happy but it's so insane.
Okay, folks, we can bring that back. Get our first 1-minute rest session. I know we've got the Purpose folks watching today, the stadium session, and thanks for joining. And we'll have to work on getting Zach's presence here on Zwift in the Purpose gear, Nor. So if you're listening, I'm sure we'll have to do some work there. So Zach,
I'll unlock some more achievements.
Yeah, you might have to do a few more miles. I see Lewis, one of the other host athletes that join us here in the stadium. He's chosen the long hair avatar in Zwift, which suits his real look here in real life. And Zach will have to get you in the Zwift kit here on Zwift. Well, folks, we got another 10 seconds to go. Going to ramp it back up on interval number 2, and then Zach will start talking about some of these best practices in a second. Let's go. Here it is.
For the people, for the land.
All right, folks. Well, thanks, Leighton, for the introduction there. So for this second rep, I'm going to step off of the treadmill and save a little legs for Desert Solstice later this year and talk to you a bit about stretching. We're going to talk about both dynamic stretching and static stretching during this workout. This first block, I want to focus more on dynamic stretching because this tends to be something I see mistakes made a lot with endurance runners. And one of the things I see kind of happen from time to time is a lot of times endurance athletes are familiar with static stretching, which is going to be kind of your traditional stretching techniques where you try to bend down and touch your toes, you lift your leg up behind you and stretch out your quadricep muscle. Maybe you find like a wedge or a curve and stretch your calf, those sort of things. Those stretchings where you get into a position and then you hold it and you hold it for say 10, 15 seconds. That's static stretching. We'll get into that more in detail later. The one we want to talk about is dynamic stretching here because it's more beneficial for faster training sessions. So when we're doing something like a short interval session or a lactic threshold type workout or before a race or something like that, you want to do a couple things. You want to get your body warmed up within the range of motion in which you're going to be doing that workout out, so your muscles are kind of fired up and ready to go and loose and warm. Yeah. So the dynamic stretches tend to be something that people have probably seen before, but maybe just don't do that often on their own. But they're things like high knees. They're things like you can do like forward lunges, leg swings, both side and forward. They're all going to take your body through that range of motion that you're actually going to use. It's going to help fire up your central nervous system, warm up those muscles, like I said, and it's not going to compromise your power output, which is the key here, because static stretching is a good thing to get you in a position to do a powerful movement, and that's what we're working to do. We're looking to kind of close that gap between rest and the work rate you're going to focus on in order to get you ready for that.
I was going to ask you about that. So yeah, you're going from like, sitting on the couch into a session like today. That's quite a change. What do you recommend there? I got your points here up on the screen. Why don't you talk through that?
Yeah, so I think basically like when I talk about going from rest to work rate, I'm thinking of like kind of like gradually making steps towards it versus going say 0 to 100 is a way to maybe analogize that. So like one would be like first you get up and you can just start out with like a nice easy jog. If you're jogging nice and slow, you probably don't need to do much stretching at all. That's going to be a light enough movement that it's gonna warm you up or kind of start that progression towards what you're looking to do. Another step, then is that dynamic stretching is another thing. That's going to fire up your central nervous system. It's going to engage your muscles a little more than a warm-up will, like a slow jog will, and just really get you in position with that.
But you do the slow jog first, yeah?
You could do it either way.
Okay.
You could. I'll usually do like a little bit of walking around at least before I start doing the dynamic stretches, since they are kind of like, you know, like a leg swing or a forward lunge or something like that. It's enough of it's a dynamic movement. So I don't necessarily like to go from sitting to that dynamic movement, right? So just getting up and like just a light a walk or a light jog is enough, and it doesn't have to be long. A couple minutes is enough. A lot of times when you see like high school track and cross country teams, they might do like a short loop around the track or something, and then they get into their dynamic warm-up type stuff before they do their actual warm-up that we can
I remember
talk
that
about
a long time ago at high school.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all about just kind of getting your body ready for the higher intensity session so that you lower that injury risk, and then ultimately get better results out of that workout. You know, if you reduce your injury risk, spend less time recovering, then you're going to be more likely to be able to add more volume at that stimulus, which is going to give you a bigger stress recovery response. Faster on race day. It's the name of the game,
folks,
right?
We're actually on a rest session right now, so you can back that off, and Zach will keep talking about it, and then we'll get into the third interval in a second, and he'll talk a little bit about static stretching. But like dynamic stretching, you know, that's one option. You also talk about doing 100-meter strides. Any kind of difference between when you'd rather do more dynamic stretching versus strides, Zach?
Yeah, for a workout like this, I'd probably incorporate them both, actually, and I would use those strides as kind of like the final piece to close that gap, so that, like, essentially when we're working at a 4-minute rate here, if you do like 300 to 400-meter strides where you're gradually accelerating up to almost a full sprint, holding that for maybe, you know, 25 to 30 meters, and then
just
gradually
ramp it back
deaccelerating.
Up, rep number 3. Sorry, Zach.
No problem. And then, so that's going to be that final piece where you close that gap. You can do some more dynamic stretches after if you want to, but after that, you're pretty much ready to hit the workout.
Well, before I let you jump back into interval 3, Zach, static stretching, would you still use that sometimes?
Yeah, I think static stretching is a great tool to have in your toolbox still. It's just a kind of a positioning of where you're going to put it. So I like static stretching away from the workout. So the soonest I would do any static stretching would be after the workout.
Gotcha.
I might even push it off into later in the day if the schedule kind of dictates that. So it's going to be good in keeping you want a good range of motion, but you also want to be like, you want to be within that range of motion. You don't want to get so flexible that you're overstriding and you're putting yourself in a position where you can pull a muscle. So the right static stretching at the right time can be helpful to do that, but the reason you don't do it before a workout like this is static stretching has shown in research to reduce your power output. So people who are doing like explosive movements like powerlifting or short intervals, they want to avoid that static stretching before because they don't want to compromise their workout.
Okay. Well, hey, we got about 2:45 to go, folks, in this third interval, so I'll let you run and I'll dial this music back up, and we'll get back to some of those hits from Zach in just a second. Hey, Lee Glassman, have you got a sub 5 for us there this afternoon? I just really want to ring the bell for you, buddy. Let's see what you got. Close. Hey Eric, I thought you said you were running slow this afternoon. You're 5:16, buddy, on a taper. Wow, good going. Sure you haven't got a sub 5 there for us to ring the bell? Yeah, sorry, buddy, I couldn't help myself. I'll let you go back to taper base. Okay, folks, you can bring that back down to a rest session here, and as we give some highlights and best practices on 10K speed, we also want to give you some best practices on nutrition. One of the things we talk about at SFuels is that first 30 minutes of keeping it carb-free, and that helps a ton on keeping your fat oxidation and your carb oxidation at the highest it can be while you're doing sessions like this. So yeah, if you're new to SFuels, we can put some comments up in the YouTube chat there to take a look at some of the material we have on this and the science behind it. It'll give you some background to when we talk about keeping carb free on that first 30 minutes. Okay, we got about 10 seconds to go, and we're going to get back into our intervals. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's ramp it back up, folks. This is rep number 4. Well, folks, while you're all running that 4th rep, I thought I'd just show you a quick video from the Purpose team on some of the detail they go into creating some intellectual property that they call hypermesh. Let's take a look at the video. Folks, Zach's running the Hypermesh this afternoon, and if you want to check out more, you can go onto Google and type in purpose.asia, and you'll see all about their current products and some of the new products to come, including Zach's own line of race gear and training gear with the Purpose Hypermesh product. So we got 1 minute and 15 to go, folks, on this course. back down. Nice interval there, team. Great to see you knocking out the big ones. We've got a minute's rest now. And we jump into interval number 5. And Zach, maybe as we get into this interval number 5, I'm sure you're breathing pretty heavy there, but I think wouldn't mind hearing a little bit about some of the good practices and maybe not so good practices on strength training.
Yeah, I think strength training is a really interesting topic to me because I think a lot of times endurance athletes, they'll decide to neglect it because it feels and looks a lot different from what they're trying to do on race day, where a lot of folks are training for 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, maybe ultra marathons, and they think, why do I need to be in the weight room with the big power lifters and bodybuilders and explosive sport folks? And when they do find themselves in there, I think a lot of times they gravitate towards, a lot of like lightweight.
Just ramp
high
up that
repetition.
5th rep, folks, for those who are staying with the reps. Keep going there, Zach.
Yeah. So I think like they get their mind of that repetition, like lightweight, high rep type of a mindset like you're going to have with running essentially. And they just replicate essentially the same thing they're doing out on the roads, the track, and the trails in the weight room, when in reality they want to be using that to focus on some of the things that they can benefit from real like strength training, which would be kind of going back to the basics, focusing on some of the fundamental movements like squats, deadlifts, weighted forward lunges, kettlebell swings, box jumps, that sort of stuff. And focusing actually on heavier weights relative to what they can handle. You don't have to go there and try to pull the same weight off the ground as the power lifters in the gym, but you do want to be focusing on things that are a little lower in repetition and higher in weight relative
reps,
to what you
higher,
can tolerate. Yeah, and one of the reasons for that is because when you're running, it's a very like a mechanically uniform movement. So you can have a lot of imbalances and overdevelopment of certain muscles and underdevelopment of others.
Gotcha.
So doing those big core movements are going to help with that, to kind of keep that balance there. The other thing, with that balance is going to actually come better form, better technique, and is going to help like reduce some of those injury risks that you'd maybe have from running long and slow as much as us endurance athletes end up doing. So that's another thing. The other thing is just focusing on your running economy. So like long story short, with running economy, we're essentially looking at how much power you can produce and what weight you're trying to move with that.
Right.
So the more power you can gain without adding any more weight or adding like marginally comparative amounts of weight, the faster you're going to move when you're running out there. So rather than thinking of these heavy weightlifting movements as something that's going to bulk you up and making you heavier and slower, think of them as making you stronger at the same relative weight. So you're going to improve that running economy. You're going to have an easier time doing some of these harder efforts. So injury prevention, running economy, muscle imbalances are 3 big reasons why getting in the weight room from time to time is useful for a runner. You don't have to go crazy because we do want to make sure we're still spending the appropriate amount of time working on the activity that you're trying to produce. So you can get away with
the actual types you were saying earlier. I think maybe not sure everyone caught that. I think you said deadlifts, squats.
Yeah, like squats are good, deadlifts are good, kettlebell swings, even though those tend to be a little more higher rep, unless you're swinging a really heavy kettlebell, those tend to work well just because they work you through that range of motion that you're going to use when you're running. So they engage like a whole host, like your core and things like that. So it's a full body lift more so than it looks sometimes, I think. So other things like box jumps, forward lunges, weighted would be ideal. So you can keep those rep count high or low. Are good ones to focus on for lower body, and it's something as simple as doing that once per week for your lower body, and maybe once. That's a great starting point. You can add more if you have experience in the gym and if you like weight training and things like that.
Right.
But for someone who's not really into weightlifting but they're looking to add in some supplementary activities to improve their running and help their running, once a week is going to be that dosage that would be a good kind of starting point for you to help with add those 3 benefits.
Gotcha. Okay, folks, we're about 23 seconds before we get into a rest session here, and we'll jump into some more key tips from Zach as we get into rep number 6. But now we're just finishing off rep number 5. Okay, folks, you can bring that back, and we'll have our minutes rest, minute silence here, and we'll ramp it back up in a second. How's the hyper mesh there performing for you, buddy?
Really good. It's been a fan favorite of mine this summer with the record temps here in Phoenix, and I know if Nor's listening, he'll appreciate that because he developed his performance wear specifically for hot weather climates. So I've been loving it. I'm looking forward to using it for my second race. I actually wore it for the treadmill 100-mile world record back in May, and I'll be wearing it again at Desert Solstice this December. So excited to put it through another test.
That was like 5 months ago.
I know.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. 2020 is just is going to stick out like a sore thumb.
All right, folks, let's ramp it back up. This is rep number 6, 105% on your lactate threshold. Let's get that music going.
You look to the sun, but you got nothing left to give. You feel you're on the...
So, Zach, block training, and obviously the other model looked at a lot is hard and easy, or hard, easy, hard, if you will. Let's start with block training, and what your thoughts are on that, what works, what doesn't, any risks associated with it.
Yeah. So just so folks are clear, when we talk about block training for this particular topic, we're talking about it in a more of a micro lens or an acute sense, where we're talking about actual workouts on the daily basis versus blocking specific intensities into certain portions of your training program and then moving on to different intensities later on, which is going to be kind of the macro use of block term. So block as in like individual workouts that you'd maybe program out at a week at a time. So a lot of people are familiar with the hard, easy, hard concept. It's kind of ingrained into our high school and our collegiate systems, where you maybe do like a short interval session on Tuesday, followed by an easy day, followed by a tempo type threshold workout on Thursday, race Saturday, long run Sunday, rinse and repeat kind of a schedule. And that's a great program for folks to start out with and kind of learn how their body responds to different workouts and really start to make those initial gains in training and racing. And the reason for that is because you kind of like, you add in those rest days in between hard sessions intentionally to make sure that you're getting the adequate rest and getting stronger from those workouts you're doing, so they're not just wasted time. But what we find in the research is that as soon as you start to see a little bit of a plateau in your training following that hard, easy, hard type of a scheduling, you can actually add no extra stimulus to your training plan by blocking your workouts, which just basically means moving the harder sessions close to one another. So rather than maybe a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule, you would move to like maybe Tuesday and Wednesday, you do short intervals Tuesday, threshold tempo work on Wednesday. And by concentrating that, you're essentially increasing your stress load, which is going to give you a bigger return on the back end. And the estimates are somewhere between 2 to 6% increase in performance benefits from blocking your workouts versus the traditional hard, easy, hard.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I know in the 100-mile training also there's a lot of athletes who are kind of doing, as they get closer to race periods, like doing a 1, 2, and 3 day, like a 30K, a 40K, and a 30K, and just day after day after day, just to kind of simulate a little bit of what 100 miles is gonna be like, right? And if they do it over, 3 consecutive days. Any kind of views on that?
Yeah, I think that's essentially like a version of block training that most ultra runners kind of come across as the first introduction to that. A lot of times is the intensity of the workout doesn't necessarily dictate whether you're blocking or not. So whether you're blocking 2 long runs and doing that kind of back-to-back long run, or you're going to like a training camp that's going to consolidate some big, long, high volume days back-to-back, sometimes 3 times in a row, to really get that stimulus. That's block training at its finest. It's just at the lower intensity, higher volume side of things. The rule of thumb with block training, though, if you can help it, is to always put the hardest effort first. So the biggest training load first. The reason for that is because those bigger training loads are they're just gonna require you to be a little fresher to execute properly. So by putting the harder one, the bigger training load first, you're just putting yourself in a position to be able to execute that workout appropriately, versus putting one of the easier ones first, getting enough residual fatigue into the second one where you can't quite hit the splits that you're looking for that second harder one.
Okay.
So that's a little more important when we're talking about some of the intensity training versus, some of the back-to-back long run type stuff. But good rule to follow. You can get a little bit of a marginal increase without any extra work. So that's the one thing that I think people need to remember is you don't have to increase what you're doing. You can simply just reorganize your schedule and get the benefits from block training.
Yeah.
So more bang for your buck is maybe one way to look at it.
That makes a ton of sense. That's great. And folks, hey, we're on a rest session here. We've got about 30 seconds to go on this rest period. One of the things from a nutritional perspective, folks, with block training is that certainly it does take a tax on the adrenal gland. And if a low-carb, high-fat athletes also, protein and sodium are the two things you want to think about when you really do those blocks, those day-to-day blocks. So certainly increasing some of your protein intake, increasing some of your sodium intake is going to help with the adrenal gland to handle and recover quickly day to day, and frankly even after the multi-day consecutive blocks. So just some ideas. We're into rep number 7. Let's ramp it back up, folks. And Zach, we'll jump in soon talking a little bit more about blocks and hard, easy, hard.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a follow-up to what we just talked about a bit, because I do want to make sure we highlight the bad with the good. So, a lot of you might be thinking, if you're not familiar with block training, this is the first you heard. I was like, well, great, I'm going to do all block training. I'm going to get those benefits for no extra work and be off to the races. And I'm looking forward to that PR. And if I don't get it, I'm going to email Zach and yell at him. The caveat here is with block training, it is an advanced training technique. So it is since you're blocking harder sessions together or bigger workloads together, you do increase your injury risk. So you have to be very careful doing these type of things. So there's a few things to look for to kind of decide whether you're willing to take on that additional risk. One is, what is your injury history? If you're someone who rarely gets injured, you maybe get a small niggle or injury every couple of years, or nothing that really pulls you from the training table, so to speak, you're possibly a good candidate for block training. If you're someone who struggles with injuries a lot, has a hard time making it through a full training block without having some sort of injury flare up and sideline you for a bit, block training might not be something that you want to tease, because you're already kind of at your threshold of an injury risk.
Right.
So adding that extra stress is just going to promote that to happen at an accelerated rate. So injury risk is something you want to make sure you mitigate before you decide to do this sort of a thing, this sort of structure. The other is just like, have you maximized your potential within the hard, easy, hard setup of training, that traditional side? The reason a lot of high schools and collegiate athletes follow hard, easy, hard versus blocking with a lot of their athletes is because these folks are typically still finding their ceiling in their training and racing.
Yeah.
So when we do look at the research with block training, the studies that actually point to it not having an increase in performance are the ones that are looking at athletes who haven't exhausted their progress within the hard, easy, hard.
Hard, easy, hard.
So,
gotcha.
So if you're just getting into training, or you ran in your life, but you haven't really done workouts and you're just getting into doing like structured workouts, structured training and things, block training is probably down the road for you as something you can pull from the toolbox once you've kind of gone through the progression and seen and reaped all the benefits from what I would call maybe the lower hanging fruit that you're going to find with that hard, easy, hard setup. So you do want to make sure you fully exhaust that structure of training before you move on to it. When I say that too, it's like, if you found yourself at a point where you kind of hit like the volume that your body can tolerate and you can tolerate within the hard, easy, hard traditional setting, you've kind of maximized the volume you can tolerate in one individual workout to where you're not really going to benefit from adding more reps to your interval sessions or lengthening your threshold workouts and your long runs and things like that. That's where it maybe becomes time to ask yourself if you can tolerate the injury risk of increasing your block or switching to block training and trying it out.
And folks, I think as part of this too, just kind of test yourself and take note how this works for you in the winter versus the summer. Certainly we've seen in different parts of the world as we've traveled around and applied these different training techniques that the summer, generally the heat and the humidity has a increased inflammatory load. And you just have to watch that as you apply blocks versus hard, easy, hard. Any comments there, Zach?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add to that, actually. One thing you can do to mitigate your injury risk, because I think I'm probably scaring a few people here talking about injury as much as I am, is that when you do these short intervals, whether you're doing a traditional or a block style, you can really mitigate the injury risk for those by doing them on an uphill plane. So you're still gonna get all the cardiovascular benefits. In fact, you're probably gonna have an easier time getting your heart rate up running uphill, and you're gonna lower the impact of it.
Right.
So the one caveat I'll add to that, if you're training for something like a 5K or something like a 10K that's a little shorter, where you're gonna want that leg turnover, you will want to do some of your short intervals on that surface so you get that mechanical turnover that you're looking for. But for someone like me who's running 100 milers in 24 hours, that's not as important to me. I'm more looking for the cardiovascular benefits to build kind of my race intensity off of. So if I feel like I'm feeling a little risky going out and doing a short interval session early in the season when I haven't gone through that system of training in a while, I might aim for something like a 6 to 8% incline and do it up that, so I lower that chance of injury and still get the benefits I'm looking for.
Well, we're on the treadmill, folks, so we can just do that. We're about 5 seconds away from the final 8th rep, and I'll let Zach ramp it up here, and we're going to get started right now. I'll let you all go. This is 8th rep, last rep. Let's bring it home, folks.
I should have done some dynamic stretches between those while I was talking.
Well, you can increase the interval on that machine to 40 degrees, as you know. So get right ahead.
That's true. I'll be hiking this last one, and I'll still be at 170 beats per minute.
There you go. Hey Lee, I just saw you scraping under the 5 there. Nice going, buddy. Sub 5 on that 8th rep. You're getting stronger every week. Great to see it, bud. Okay, let's see how Eric's doing. Jump across here and bring him up. Oh, here he is. Coming up. There he is. Still on the track there, plowing out the miles. We're at 250 into this 8th final rep, folks. Got about 245 to go. Great input, Zach. Love the inputs, love the insights you're giving us here in the stadium. Thanks for sharing it with us and powering through on this 8th rep. Let's get on with it, team. We've got about 130 to go, folks, on this final rep. Let's keep the pressure up and keep strong here. Nice going there, Eric. Do a bit of speed work before the race coming up. Into the 430s there. Nice going there. Close up there, folks, on the hypermesh and SFuels by inside. I think maybe when he stopped, Zach might have lost his connection with Zwift.
Am I not showing up?
Yeah, I think you're running a lot faster than what Zwift's showing.
I got 174 heart rate. 5 15-mile pace.
There you go. Nice going. Okay, folks, that's the 8th and final rep of today. Nice going today to churn out that 10K speed development session and get a few tips from 100-mile world champion. And we're going to jump over now across to, if you haven't been here before, this is the recovery kitchen. And hey, we're running a bit of a promo at the moment. You'll see the code there, Revive Me Now, if you want to jump across to the SFuels store and get hold of some of those bars at or the Revival Recovery Protein Shake Powder. You can do that there by typing in Revive Me Now at the checkout, and you'll get the discounts applied. And if you haven't used the SFuels before, down at the bottom left there, you see the QR code. And I'll put the link up in the YouTube notes later, and you can get hold of that low-cost pack. How you feeling there, Zach?
Pretty good. It's amazing how much better you feel when you do 3.5 instead of 8.
Well, a number of the folks here churned out the full 8, I think, and I know Lee and Eric have been in the 4s and the 5s most of those sessions. So
excellent.
Great to see the performance. And Zach, really thanks very much for sharing some of those ideas, and hopefully folks, this gives you a sense of some of the things we're going to be bringing together here in the stadium, of not just the training session, but we're going to mix up education and training and entertainment all into one and have a blast doing it. Hey folks, if you're out there in Zwift still, or even just running, take a photo of yourself, or in Zwift, whatever you prefer. And you'll see that on Instagram and also on Facebook, that if you search for SFuels, that you'll be able to put the stickers on top of your picture there and share it out onto social, and we'd appreciate that. Tell others about what we've got here happening in the stadium. Well, hey, Zach, it's been a pleasure sitting with you and hearing some of these tips with you again. Thanks for joining us, bud. I hope your rest of your week goes well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing me in to share some of the tips and jump in on a few of the intervals. And awesome work, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you at the next Sweat Fest here at the SFuels Stadium.
Sounds great. Well, hey, folks, as I said, check out those stickers, whack them onto your photos, get it out there. Until next time, go longer, be well. Thanks again. Talk soon.
With tips from Ironman World Champion Dave Scott and Dr. Dan Plews, the SFuels and Endure IQ Spring 2020 Quick Start Guide is out now. It's packed with info, charts, and tools to rapidly transition your endurance training and racing to your best results yet. Download yours today and raise your performance with SFuels. With tips from Ironman World Champion Dave Scott and Dr. Dan Plews, the SFuels and Endure IQ Spring 2020 Quick Start Guide is out now. It's packed with info, charts, and tools to rapidly transition your endurance training and racing to your best results yet. Download yours today and raise your performance with SFuels.